on this rap-ish. I ain't even broke a sweat, homie, this practice. Pondering my next move, staring at my track list. Hope I ain't miss my window. Praying like a Baptist, Seattle's own. Tired of this Game of Thrones. They made a list of the best rappers, and guess who wasn't on? While the disrespect continues, I'm steady packing these venues. Guess if you ain't at the table, you on the menu. And I'm that spitter, baby. They don't want you to see, but everybody's south of Capitol Hill's rocking with me. Boys smoke the trays and ponder getting their life together. I'm comfortable with my role, so I'm like, whatever. Me? I ain't got a job, but I work hard. And you don't work hard, but you got a job. The irony is I'm judged while you feel the applause. I'm slept on, that's why I had to set this alarm. My dudes is armed, I'm armed with this arm charm. Body banging like she got that cream from Barry Bonds. Yeah.
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
That Dre season is here, a real hitter with a mic, I'm everything that they fear. With that hood ain't the same, I was all on their ass, I'm level-headed. So yo, my dudes love when I spaz, and I'm so over Seattle's passive-aggressive attitude. They don't call you back, what they really saying is F you. While I'm from the same place, I move at a different pace. I prefer if you just said it to my face, damn, I did it.
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it
I hate
for
these
us.
average dudes with they average spit, writing average rhymes, knocking average chicks. The closer I get, I can feel the people starting to shift. I'm loyal to a fault, and everybody can't come with. Rap's a rich man's game, I'm only playing with change. They bang models and singers, I'm knocking my old flame, I'm different. The crowd, I move with the chosen few. Black thoughts, I could be the front man for the roots. No diamonds and gold, I'm on my sticks and stones. If we can see your panty line, you should have on a thong. My team is strong, through this fire we forged a bond. And they already know what it is when I get on. To the hearse, party like it's December 31st. When I'm on my deathbed, I probably cracking my nurse. You ain't got the bars to compete. I'm a verbal athlete, deflating these boys so they say that I cheat. Damn, I did it.
I did it for the city, I did it for the love, I did it for the people, I did it for us.
Yeah. I should probably start by apologizing for the long wait, man. You know, I know I be tripping. But I'm not just a rapper, I'm an artist. And, you know, my creative process is a little bit different than most. Nonetheless, I want to welcome everybody out to the Dre's Experience. I got TCF in the building. My whole camp's here with me. I got the band in here laying this cool-ass vibe. And I'm Seattle's own. Let's get into it.
Good morning and grand rising. Happy Monday to all of you out there. Welcome to the Morning Update Show. I am your co-host, Trey Holiday, and it is such a beautiful day. You guys, I'm excited to be celebrating the beauty with my partner, Big O. What up, Big O?
Trey Holiday.
Hey, what's going on?
I'm good. Did you have a nice weekend?
Sure did, man. You know, some good family time. Always nice to be in community. Celebration of some great solar returns, birthdays, Earth days. They have so many names now. Right. Miss Patricia Ballantyne and so many others. So it's great, you know. Great
was hanging with the real OGs, huh?
you know it,
they
man.
Dr. Mims too, huh?
Yeah, you know, they keep me on my toes, bro, every time. So it was great to be with them, in space with them, you know, as restaurants are opening. And also, you know, there to patron some of our local businesses. It was good.
All right. I see Darnell Hibbler say good morning. Darnell's all the way out in New York checking in. We see you, Darnell.
Happy birthday to you, Darnell. You just had a birthday too, man.
Yeah,
one of our day oneers.
He's doing it moving. Before we get started, I want to wish everybody a happy Passover. For people who are celebrating Passover. This is a great opportunity for you to tag and share the stream. Go ahead and tag and share the Morning Update Show with people who you feel would appreciate culturally relevant news, information, and headlines emanating from right here in the Central District. And also, Trey Holiday, I'm always talking about how I don't never get no gear. People always bring you clothes. I don't get anything. Big shout out to Buki Gates at Baseball Beyond Borders. I got the fresh cap here, the beanie. We can't wait to hit Safeco Field and catch the M's. Yes, I did say Safeco. We old school over here and catch the M's. Man, we've got a fellow Bulldog in the house today.
Absolutely.
We've got Bruce Harrell, former city council member and city council president. I think he was mayor for like 4 days too.
Yeah, right.
But Bruce Harrell is in the building. He's thrown his hat into the race for mayor of Seattle. Believe it or not, 4 black men running for mayor of the city of Seattle, and a whole lot of other people. So we'll be talking to Bruce here shortly.
Absolutely. I'm just loving it because we talked about it right here on this platform that, we need more diversity. We're seeing the diversity come out in the droves. It's great.
The diversity is definitely there. We got only a few headlines today because we're going to reserve most of our time for our interview. But before we get started with anything, today is Jake Gravbrott's birthday. Everybody knows Jake, a photographer, photojournalist, producer. He was a co-producer on the Vanish in Seattle films. I caught up with Jake. He's actually down in Flagstaff, Arizona. He went on a road trip with his camera to celebrate his 40th birthday. But I caught up with him so we could wish him a happy birthday. All right, man. Checking in with the big fella, Jake Gravbrott. It's down there in Flagstaff, Arizona. First of all, I have to say happy birthday to you. Happy 40th birthday, big fella. What's going on?
Hey, thank you. First of all, I hit that. I hit a milestone, so I figured, I had to do something for myself for this particular one. So I spent a lot of spring breaks on the road with my son back in the day when he was younger, and this one was a solo road trip through the Southwest. So I'm in Flagstaff. I think this is my 3rd day out of 6. So I'm trekking around. I've seen a little bit of everything so far.
Right. Now, and tell us about some of these photos that we're seeing right here.
Well, gosh, I mean, like I said, I've seen a little bit of everything. So I've had this storm that's kind of been chasing me around the Southwest, and I've met it head on yesterday. So probably my favorite image that I've actually shot so far of this entire trip is this one of Monument Valley with this impending storm that's about to pummel Monument Valley, which is in the southern part of Utah, and right as you go over the border, or right as you go through it, you get into the border of Arizona. So it rests right on the border. And this storm trekked through Arizona, and holy cow, it dumped hail and snow. I had to pull over a few times because I was like, I'm not going to drive through this. There's no way. But before it hit, it was going through Monument Valley as I was about to make my way through Monument Valley. So this shot is just like kind of the most epic photo that I've probably ever taken, because you have this storm, this perfect southwest storm that's about to blow over, this iconic roadway shot that's in the movie Forrest Gump, which is now why everyone stops at that particular spot. So
right. And tell us, a lot of people became familiar to your photography through the protests, and of course so many photos through protest coverage and here on Converge. A lot of people might not be hip. You're a big nature photographer.
Well, I mean, I love nature. So, I've kind of had to pivot it a lot myself, actually, because of COVID. I haven't been photographing people in the same kind of way that I used to. So I went back to my roots and just found myself consistently back out in nature, this time just without people, because I would always go with people and photograph. But now I'm like, the landscape is my subject, and it's been really fun, and it's been great to just kind of go back and reconnect to some of these beautiful spaces too.
Right. Well, I'll tell you this, Jake, on behalf of everybody here at Converge, all of your colleagues, and of course, all of our viewers, supporters, subscribers, some of everybody else, we're wishing you a very, very happy 40th birthday. The pictures that you've been taking are awesome. And I can't wait till you get back here, because we're going to go and check out the M's. That's your birthday present.
Hey, thank you. I can't wait, man. Boys are back in town, that's for sure. Baseball, while still socially distanced, it's going to be good to get out there and see some Mariners games. We got a good team, and I have actually barely had a chance to see Kyle Lewis. So let's go watch this dude do what he does.
All right, brother. Happy birthday to you. Enjoy it out there in Arizona, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. All right. Peace.
Jake Gravbrott.
Man, amazing photos, Jake. I mean, clearly the perspective that he captures through his lens is, like no other. It is, and also too, one of the things that I love, and I think our audience also will agree with me, that when you see a photo, it's Jake's. It's like he has this very specific eye, man. Kudos to you, Jake. Happy 40th, my brother. We love you so much. So glad you're out there doing what you do best.
Yeah, because Jake, you got a lot of pictures of you.
Yeah, absolutely. He's my favorite photographer. He captures me so well. Yeah.
All right. So on this interesting developments here with the King County Sheriff. So, there was a settlement in the Tommy Lay case. The King County settled for $5 million with the Lay case. There wasn't an apology or anything in there, but some reporting from Carolyn Bick of the South Seattle Emerald, a lot of other papers picked up after it. Carolyn Bick got her hands on a leaked email from the sheriff, where the sheriff, the tone of the email was kind of counter to the actual settlement, and as well as to the outside investigation that looked into the Tommy Lay case. And remember, we've been covering this now for almost a year. The Tommy Lay, and we talk about how it was like peeling an onion. First, they said Lay had a knife, then he didn't have a knife, then he had a pen, then maybe he didn't have a pen, then there was destruction of evidence. Then they wanted the grandmama to come to the courthouse during COVID and some everything else. And yeah, the sheriff, you can read more about it at the South Seattle Emerald, but the sheriff had an internal email that I think she probably wishes she could take back. This is my conversation with Carolyn Bick.
Yeah, I think that this email is a very blatant representation of the continuing narrative within the King County Sheriff's Office versus the narrative outside the King County Sheriff's Office, and it really kind of sets up a thin blue line sort of feeling, I suppose, with the sheriff saying that she stands with all of the officers, and that she, I believe, said she thanked Molina. Let me just double check that she thanked. Yeah, she said I shared my appreciation of the difficulty of decision and actions he had to take. I also appreciate the teamwork all contributing members made that night to protect the residents of that neighborhood and the following investigative work. And, the quote unquote following investigative work also included destruction of evidence, which has been proven. And also raised all those red flags that we just talked about in the OOIR group report.
Anything else about this case that you want our viewers to know?
This case specifically, I think that it had a lot of implications for so many people, and it still has a lot of implications for folks. And obviously, the most implications for the Lay family themselves, but I think also just in the way the community may now see the sheriff's office, or may continue to see the sheriff's office. Certainly in the feeling of division between the sheriff's office and the community. And some other individuals too who were involved in the case, not necessarily as family members. And I think that the way the sheriff's office handled this particular case is going to have a lot of repercussions that have yet to be seen.
So some of these repercussions might yet to be seen. I tweeted this out on Saturday, is when I actually talked to Carolyn Bick. And some county council members jumped on the tweet, and they were like, yo, now that this is settled, it can speak freely. And you hear that a lot of people on the King County Council were really upset that, an apology wasn't included in the settlement. They were upset about the sheriff's emails. And one other thing that I forgot to mention in this story here, this peeling back of the onion, is that at first they said that Lay was attacking the officers, but it turns out that Lay was shot in the back, which indicates he very well might have even been on the ground. Yeah. And so, there was a lot of flags around this case. And the sheriff is now on the hot seat. Not this time. It actually called for resignation a few weeks ago. But now with this reporting, this great reporting from Carolyn Bick at the South Seattle Emerald, and I don't know how they do it, but Carolyn, stuff falls in their lap.
An ear plug to the ground, as we say out here. I think it's so important because oftentimes there isn't enough opportunity to expose truth. And I think that this is a great example of it. Man, shout out to Carolyn, for being able to put a real spotlight on this. And I think many people in community are, in a sense outraged, but also some are just not surprised by some of the language, used by the sheriff in terms of, the ways that this email came out and the sentiment it held.
Well, how could the sheriff ever justify? So maybe it came down to like, okay, we want to fire the deputy. Sheriff can't fire the deputy now. The sheriff sent a very an email praising the deputy.
Yeah.
And so we're gonna see what happens with this. But again, the South Seattle Emerald, you can check it out. Carolyn Bick. Last headline today. This was national story. Of course, today is the first day of the Chauvin trial, also called the George Floyd trial out there in Minnesota. And it was interesting. I was up early this morning as usual, and I was walking to the studio, and the press conference was happening there where you had Ben Crump and a lot of the lawyers there and Al Sharpton and a few other people. And at 8:46, which was 6:46 this morning, they all took a knee for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And so I noted that on my watch at 8:46, I was at the Westin Hotel. 8 minutes and 46 seconds later, I was at Seattle Art Museum. So that's how long of that walk was, 8 minutes and 46 seconds. We got a short clip right here of Reverend Al Sharpton addressing the crowd earlier at a press conference in Minneapolis.
Why is the attempt being made by the defense to talk about what was the stimulants that may have been in George Floyd? What would be the stimulant that would make a man hold his knee on a man's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds? What kind of venom, what kind of hatred do you have that would make you keep pressing down that long while a man is begging for his life, while a man is asking for his mother? At what point does your humanity kick in? At what point does the letter of the law kick in? At what point do you say, wait a minute, the guidelines kick in? This was not 8 seconds. This was not a flash of anger. It became intentional and deliberate. And justice must be intentional and deliberate in this courthouse. But make no mistake about it. Chauvin is in the courtroom, but America's on trial. America's on trial to see if we have gotten to the place where we can hold police accountable if they break the law. The law is for everybody. Policemen are not above the law. Policemen are subject to the law. And that's what's going on in this courtroom.
So trial is underway today out there in Minneapolis. And the defense, part of their defense is what they're saying is that George Floyd had drugs in his system, and they're like, oh, well, he would have died anyway. And it's a part of their defense. Now, if someone's on trial, they got to mount a defense, but that's their defense. But it's a lot of people that are jumping on the bandwagon.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things where I think so many of us are really appalled at even the structure of this defense. When you look at the video and when you realize and read all of the details, so many of us have been exposed to as more and more reports came out, more and more details came out, showcasing that they were doing this because they thought he passed a bad check. And then they never even confirmed that. When you start pulling out all of the threads that really this case has, for that to be their line of defense, it's appalling, to be honest. But you're right. They have to come up with something. And this is like, I guess, maybe the one thing that they thought they could try to come up with. But again, I like what Reverend Al Sharpton said there. I mean, this is really America being on trial, whether it's Chauvin or not. This is really a testament to how we're going to move as a progressive nation and what we're going to be doing, because we do have to address what we just talked about with the sheriff's office. We have to address the fact that there is a blatant idealism that lives in the minds and bodies of so many officers, and we see it play out time and time again with police brutality, abuse of force, and all of that. So it is important right now that America take this seriously.
Yeah, and I think that it's real interesting because man, it's so many dynamics around this. You know, he's black, and just like we saw here, even I like to compare things to my lived experience here in Seattle. That when it was crack, we criminalized. But it's black people, when it's white people on open or opioids, we humanize, and we say that it's a public health crisis. But when it was black, it was mandatory minimums and some of everything else. So I wonder if that narrative would fly. You see what I'm saying? In in a different light, or even in a different city. I mean, here in Seattle and across the country, people's views of drug use or drug in your system is much different if you're white. And we've seen that in the ways that laws have changed, the ways that I mean, when Marcus Green talked about, it was like years ago it was called crack babies, but no one calls these guys oxytots.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And we find that when white communities are impacted, anything that impacts white communities, laws change, things shift, and everything else. And so with him being black, they're saying, oh, well, he had drugs in his system, then people automatically, what I'm saying, they're looking at it a bit differently than if he wasn't. Because then it would be like, oh, well, he was just having a public health crisis. He was just having or whatever and everything else. You get what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
These narratives matter.
The narratives change with race. And if we want to be denying that, we're really doing ourselves a disservice. And I think that there's people that still have issues with reconciling with that very truth. We are seeing it play out right now in the midst of headlines, right now in the midst of people's lived experience. When we talk about the families that have to begin to continue to suffer the trauma of losing a loved one in such a public facing way. Every time something comes out, I always go back to how the families are experiencing that. He was, as they said, no, my brother was a great man. He was doing this, he was doing that. But here we are now, this narrative about him having drugs in his system. And that's going to cause some people to go, well, hey, I don't know really what was going on there. No, 8 minutes and 46 seconds does not, again, it is not negated by the fact that he may have had drugs in his system. I don't care what nobody says.
Let me tell you like this, and we'll leave it here because we got to go to break, is that, guys that are suffering from opioids and different drugs today, and God bless you, it's a lot of jurisdictions in America where you can go to the police department and you could be like, man, here's my drugs. I have a problem. I wasn't going down like that in the crack era. You know what I'm saying? It was an arrest. And we see that like simple possession was still the law when, you know what I'm saying? When it was other people. Now the Supreme Court here in the state, they've changed simple possession. We got to take a break right here because me and Trey, I know we could stay on this one all day long. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we got a bulldog in the house, and he's running for mayor. Bruce Harrell is in the building. You're watching the Morning Update Show.
I did it for the city. I did it for the love. I did it for the people. I did it for us.
Back on this rap ish, I ain't even broke a sweat, homie. This practice, pondering my next move, staring at my track list, hope I ain't miss my window. Praying like a Baptist, Seattle's own. Tired of this Game of Thrones. They made a list of the best rappers, and guess who wasn't on? While the disrespect continues, I'm steady packing these venues.
Converge Media produces culturally relevant content for Black and urban audiences. Our coverage is raw, transparent, and objective, praised by community leaders, government officials, and residents. Support Converge Media today via Venmo, Cash App, or PayPal at Converge Media.
All right, welcome back to the Morning Update Show. My name is Omari Salisbury, and check this out. We are joined by Bruce Harrell. Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. I enjoyed your discussion a few minutes ago. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, man, let's start right there. Which part, the sheriff or George Floyd? Or
All of it.
both, huh?
I mean, all of it's part of the work that we do and why I'm running for mayor. So all of it. The narrative coming out of the King County Sheriff's Office is a bad narrative in terms of spinning what actually happened. That was unjustified and unlawful, and they should issue an apology unconditionally. You don't spend $5 million without having liability. So that's number one. Number two, your narrative about what's happening, how the laws have changed relative to George Floyd. And I want to talk a little bit about where do we go from here post George Floyd, post trial. I'll leave it there, but your narrative on how things change when the opioid crisis had become a crisis, and we've been dealing with drug issues in our communities for decades and decades and decades, it was not humanized. And quite frankly, you know, I'm born and raised here. And so I showed you pictures of people that I went to TT Minor with in Meany and Garfield, and I lost many of them who are not here today because they got caught up in that life. So it's personal.
That's what's up. Yeah, from the Central District, I'll throw this out there. You know, everybody knows we're always talking about the CD and from Garfield High School, but we still got to put you in the hot seat, Chief. So first question for you, same question we ask everybody else. Number one, why are you running for mayor of Seattle?
Well, Einstein sort of came up with this quote, but I'm going to spin the way he said it a little bit. The greatest opportunity can be found in the greatest difficulties. Right now, we are some very, very difficult times. And you could say, well, what's so difficult about it, right? Well, we could talk about the racial injustice that has awakened this country for the first time in a few decades in the George Floyd. Now, the George Floyd situation was not new to us, right? But it was new to a lot of people. We could talk about the homelessness that it's everywhere you see. And when I was in Seattle, we had people of limited means. I mean, my neighbors were on fixed income, retired vets, janitors, but they lived around us as part of our community. So we have a whole new subclass of poverty now. You can't have so much wealth in a society. You can't have a person worth 186 billion and not have that extracted from somewhere, and you see the aftershocks in our streets. So that's of shame. And we can talk about what we see in downtown and Capitol Hill and small business districts, small business in business districts that are suffering. They were already surviving by a thread because of e-commerce, right? We have to recognize that, you know, Amazon, I believe, is responsible for about 45% of e-commerce activity. And so because buying habits have changed, a lot of small businesses were already on thin margins. I have a plan for all of this, by the way, and we can get into it. But that's of a crisis nature too. So why am I running? Because my whole life story has been to go where the action is, go where there is help, go where there is difficulty. And I think I've lived a lifestyle or a life calling of trying to help when people need help. So that's why I'm running.
All right. And so there's a lot of people that are in the race for mayor, don't necessarily have a record that we can call upon. Now, you were there in city council with 3 terms?
Yes.
So three terms there in city council, and part of your time there, you were city council president. Maybe you could talk about some of your accomplishments, but then also some of the things that failures or things that didn't happen while you were there in city council.
Sure. Thanks for the question. Well, you know, right now, I had written in 2009 or 2010 an op-ed about body cameras. And I had to go on the debate circus. I had to take on the ACLU at Kane Hall as an example at University of Washington. And I said that the reason why I support body cameras, and people thought I was crazy, you know, officers wearing cameras, you know, who wants that? Because I said that we have to have a new form. We have to use technology for accountability. So I was the first one to come out with that. And I pushed and I pushed and I debated. And I finally got a pilot. And now, a couple of years later, Obama called for national body cameras, and we saw body cameras in 20 or 30 small departments throughout the city. We had more resistance here in Seattle than many of the other cities, but accomplishing that was a huge task. Banning the box legislation, I was the sole sponsor of that. Why would I do that? Because I looked at the disparities in the judicial system. I would tell, particularly when I'm talking in my neighborhood, that when the job application says, have you ever been arrested or convicted of a crime, we would tighten up. because how people were charged and prosecuted was clearly a disparate treatment in the judicial system. So it's totally unfair. It perpetuates the unfairness during a job application. So I was the sole sponsor of that. The Race and Social Justice Initiative that the city talks about now, I was the one that converted that to legislation. What Mayor Nichols had done had come up with the idea. But what do you do with an idea? So when Mayor McGinn was elected, I had many of the Black employees meet at my house. And I said, well, what does this really race and social justice means? What it means for us is that when you are making a decision or a policy or a budget decision, that the people who it affects, they need to be at the table. And you have to look at it through the lens of how it affects them. We have to be at the table. So every budget decision, every policy decision has to be put through a race and social justice initiative. I was a sponsor of that, the sole sponsor of that. And I'll close with the bias-free policing notion. I passed a bias-free law because I want to know who's getting stopped, whose tail light just seems to happen to go out more than others, who failed to make a signal just more than others. So under the consent decree, there are some requirements that the city do in terms of tracking the data in terms of who is arrested and how they charge it. So I put forth a law that I sponsored to make sure that racial profiling and bias-free policing, even after the consent decree, is part of our fabric. So that's kind of work that I've been doing. I could, go on and on. Now, where did we fall short, or where did I fall short? And the one thing I will say, if blessed to be mayor, is that the buck will stop with me. I don't make mistakes. I just made a mistake. I don't make excuses. I do that on purpose. I do it with my kids. Okay. I give myself permission to make about 10 mistakes a day. That was actually my third one. I don't make excuses. Okay. I'm a can-do kind of person. You get around me, we're going to build a team and we're going to get it done. We're going to try. Where I think we could have done a lot better is just getting the action done, getting things done, whether it's putting someone in the in shelter that needs shelter, whether it's making sure the police did not use unreasonable force, but a city council member is a policy leader. He or she, they make the law and they earmark the budget. Perhaps we could have been louder, because I got so much inaction for years, and people would come at me and say, Bruce, we need you to do this. And so I never say, look at all this great work we did, because people were still hungry for change, hungry for more. So in that sense, I think the public leaders sort of failed.
Right. I saw in a few other interviews, I think in the day that you made your announcement, one of the issues that people brought up is the issue of homelessness. The city of Seattle spends over $1 billion a year around the homeless issue. Homelessness was an issue when you were on the council. It's still an issue here today. What are some of the things, I guess, when you were in the council, but more importantly, how would you address homelessness here today?
So first of all, when I was on the council, we identified some policies that actually work. You have to offer someone shelter before you remove them. You have to give them drug and alcohol treatment. You have to go upstream and look at people who are housing insecure and make sure they have money to do housing foreclosure prevention kinds of programs. House them first. Don't try to ask them if they have drug and alcohol problems. We know these kinds of policies work. We also figured out that we had to have a regional approach, because Seattle's 88 square miles is hard enough for a barista or a food service worker to work in Seattle. And so we have a limited square footage here. So we had to look at regionally, because people are coming from all around the county. Those things work. Here's the biggest change that I will do as mayor. That most people that I know, they will say, man, I want to house them, I want to help, but they don't know the entry point. Well, what am I supposed to do? What we're going to create is, number one, a portal such that they can give. We will raise over $100 million. That'll be our goal. And I think, my wife was the first African-American and the first woman to be the local CEO of United Way. We know how to raise money. We have the right people on our phone to be able to call people to make sure we can raise money. So number one, our goal will be to raise $100 million and make sure that money goes directly to homelessness services. And equally important, we're going to open up the portal so people could see where they can give away clothes, where they can help someone with a resume, where they can participate in some drug and alcohol counseling, where they can give away a turkey. So we want the city to be known as a city of compassion. People are saying, what do I do? Where do I go? We're going to make it real simple. We have 700,000 people in this city. And if we say we're a compassionate city, they need to know the entry point. So we're going to do that. And I got to tell you, the other structural change I made was to make sure that I will put $10 million in each of the 7 districts to make sure that council member can work with community to preserve the right institutions, to look at homelessness issues, to be able to have some finances to do a granular approach in their particular communities. So, I do hold a master's degree in organizational design and improvement. Most people know I'm just a lawyer, but I look at how organizations work, and I want to make sure that we are not sub-optimized, but we are very efficient as a city. So we're going to change the structure and change the culture in how we give in the city.
Right, and I hope somewhere in there as well, holding some of the providers accountable. It's a lot of money to spend on homelessness. I think that a lot of people want to see checks and balances, making sure that we're getting a return on the investment.
I do want to correct the statement. You said we spent $1 billion. We spent about north of 180 million. I think you meant not $1 billion. Our general sub fund is about $1 billion. We have another $1 billion in another $2 billion in other revenue streams, but we're not spending $1 billion, at least to my knowledge, we're not spending $1 billion on homelessness as a city.
Accountability.
Yeah. What about accountability?
Well, this is a problem the city has been fighting for a long time.
So
as far as the provider, we saw here lots of gaps in the way that there's lots of gaps right now in the way that there's approach to homelessness in the city. And so, there's funds being spent on combating homelessness. And, one of the things people talk about on the street level is the accountability of the people who are getting funds that are supposed to provide services.
Yeah. I'm looking at you. Should I look at your viewers a little bit? So I'm just kidding. I got to tell you, you are, you're making history by doing this. I was amazed when you guys were talking earlier. I was thinking, when I was much younger, we had like 5 stations, 4, 5, 7, 11, and 13 is a little fuzzy. And now you're doing this live streaming, and I'm thinking technology changed the world. Now, let me go back to your question on accountability. The reason I don't bash a lot of the people doing that work, because I say they're always doing God's work. People don't go into that business to get rich. They're going in there to help people, and that's part of their calling. If we do not have the accountability in place, that is not their fault. That is our fault. If we do not identify the right outcomes, the right measurements, and we're not holding them accountable, that is our fault, not their fault. Most of these people have backgrounds in social work. Most of these people are very kind. And so I don't denigrate them. I want to uplift them and make sure that the outcomes are measurable. So in my plan, I talk about in the $10 million earmarked for each district, putting forth these specific outcomes. In the fundraising special contract we will do, we'll make sure that identifiable benchmarks and outcomes are there. So I will be held accountable, and I expect everyone around me to be held accountable. But I do want to thank the people doing what I call God's work down there on the ground.
All right, let's talk about public safety. What is your vision here? Well, first of all, maybe you can give us your analysis of what you see going on in public safety policing here in Seattle currently, and then what's your vision for 4 or 5 years from now, what public safety will look like under your administration?
So you can't train culture. And what I tell folks is that, again, we are trying to achieve a lot of the right policies in the police department. We've been under a consent decree, but by virtue of the fact you saw a lot of officers going to January 6th in DC, and by virtue of the fact you hear some of the same rhetoric coming out of the police department, I don't think anyone is convinced that culture has changed in the last 10 years. So the question then becomes, how do you change the culture? Yes, you have the right leadership saying you must do this. Yes, you must train, but that doesn't train a culture. How do you train a culture? How do you change one? How you change a culture is if the 4 of us were officers, the informal leaders in an organization will say what's tolerated and what's not. They will say what's cool and what's uncool. That I've had so many officers, because I went to Garfield and in University of Washington with many officers, they'll say, I would have never done that. That is despicable what happened. They'll speak out against George Floyd situation, but they whisper it. Under my mayoral leadership, we will make sure that these informal leaders, and I will identify them by name, 20, 30 of them, will make sure we change the culture and we celebrate. If today an African American was not shot at the hands of the police, we're going to celebrate today. And every Friday we're going to celebrate. You build a culture by knowing which norms are accepted and not accepted. You celebrate the victories. You celebrate them. Now, your brother and many members know what I do at the Esquire Club. You know, I'm chairman of the board of Esquire Club. We have over 100 brothers in there. We end in prayer, but they know how I took the culture and I said, we're going to celebrate everything we do right. We're going to catch each other in the act of doing things right. That's what a police department has to do. That they have to say, George Floyd, and I said on my kickoff, they're going to watch the 8 minutes and 46 seconds. They're going to say, that's not going to happen here in Seattle. John T. Williams, that was murder. That's not going to happen here in Seattle. So we're going to change the culture. And you can't come from the top down. It has to come from within an organization. This has to change, okay? And if they're not on a program, they just got to go. They have to go. It's as simple as that. So working with the unions, working with the leadership, working with the sergeants, working with the captain, we're going to change the culture, and we're going to catch them doing things right. And I'm going to need the community with me, right? I'm going to need the community with me.
You definitely going to need the community working with the union. I only got 2 more questions left for you, mostly about business and economics. First of all, last week, the DSA, Downtown Seattle Association, they released a new ad that said downtown is open for business, trying to get more people down here. Of course, our studio's here in downtown. One of the big questions is, coming out of COVID, what's your plan as far as re-energizing and activating downtown? And clearly it's going to be what we would say a new normal. A lot of businesses have closed. What opportunities are presented out of the crisis of COVID for downtown?
And well, I say 2 opportunities, and I describe those 2 opportunities. I want to make your listeners know that, quite honestly, I'm not trying to impress anyone with my wit or ability. I'm trying to recruit. I need people to come and help us win this thing. I want to make that crystal clear. There's no shame in my game in saying, if you're listening, you know me, I was born here. Come and talk to me off the record. We keep it real, as my 3 children say here in Seattle. I'm trying to recruit. Now, let me ask you a question directly. I see 2 avenues here. Number one is, I call it 1962 World's Fair thinking. I'm sure when they had the World's Fair, someone said, hey, well, let's build a space needle. People say, you're out of your mind. We have an opportunity for what I call a rebirth of downtown Seattle. What is it going to look like? Why will people choose to go downtown as opposed to South Center, Northgate, Bellevue Mall? What is it that's going to drive them there? And what that is, we're going to build it, and we're going to work it. Okay, get the right urban planners, right civic minded people, the right community organizers. We're going to build that. Number one. Number two, we're going to have business to business relationships like we've never seen before. So if Amazon, for example, if they extract $17 million in revenue an hour, which they do, then how does a small person working from their home or a small shop who bakes sweet potato pies, how do they play a role in that, right? Now, people know when I was at the city council, I recycled dollars in our African-American community all the time. That was on the top of the list. And I talk about that. I'll ask you, who's your lawyer? Who's your accountant? Who's your doctor? Who's your plumber? Who's your painter? Are you recycling money in your own community? That's what we do at the Esquire Club. So we're going to have business-to-business relationships unlike we've ever had before. That's called relationship capital, okay? When I grew up, T.T. Minor, me, and Garfield, my relationship capital was sort of small. Well, I've had a few decades to grow that, okay? So we're going to see small businesses, BIPOC businesses, underrepresented businesses have partnerships and relationships unlike they've ever seen before. And quite frankly, I've been doing that work for 20 years. Made a lot of businesses very successful in that process, but you're going to see that on steroids when we come out of this post-COVID recovery.
Right. And now, you know, when we talk about our neighborhood, the Central District of Seattle, James A. Garfield High School, and we talk about the South End of Seattle. When we look at the numbers here, we talk about it, the big 3 here on the Morning Update show, and that's the income gap. Average Black household, $42,500 a year. Average white household, $105,000. The decline in home ownership. Home ownership is part and parcel with generational wealth. And then also the education gap here between Black and white students. For people in the neighborhood, you know, we've seen, we talk about it here all the time. Democrats have been in power in the city of Seattle for almost 40 years. I think in the State House for 30 years. Man, but we've been in constant decline when you look at all the numbers. What will you as mayor do intentionally to disrupt these troubling numbers in the Black community that have been on a downward trend now for decades?
You know, I was the lawyer for Dr. Brent Jones, who will be our superintendent for public schools here very shortly. He did go to Franklin. We won't hold that against him, but he is a good brother. Okay. So under his leadership, I think you're going to see our educational policies really, from a granular approach, really create some richness that we have to have. Now, I look down because the term Sankofa mentoring, I think you all are familiar with that. And what's interesting in my personal life, because my mom and dad did not go to college. My mother was intern as a Japanese person when she was a young girl. My dad came here from Louisiana. So it's not like I was born into any kind of wealth. What happened for me was I had the right mentors in my life. I showed you a picture of, those were all black fathers that were our baseball coaches, right? I believe that the city has to make sure that every person, every child, every person can have someone in their life, in addition to the parents, that could tap into that brilliance. That the city's job is to make sure that the infrastructure is such that people want entry points to help, and we have to create that entry point. So what you're going to see you're going to see me ask a lot of people. I don't golf. I would miss the ball. But there are a lot of people that want to golf and teach a young person how to golf. It has nothing to do with golf. It has to do with that relationship. Come on over to the Central District. Come on over here and meet this little kid that doesn't even know how to hold a club. Spend some time with that person. Number one. Number two, I was the first person to make sure that in the 13th year that people can go to school for free in South College for 1 year to get their life together. We're not starting at a level playing field. So we have to understand that money is a huge impediment for college as well. So my answer is twofold. One is to make sure that this person is self-esteem. They feel good about themselves. They see the brilliance in themselves because people are constantly saying, you could do this. That's what my mother and father did. I was so privileged to have the mother and father that I did. So we're going to tap into that brilliance of each child, and then we're going to bring in new resources, new mentorship, such that they could see their brilliance. And then we're going to make sure that the financial impediments are largely removed to the extent we can. And that's why I was so glad that Biden came out for this community college for all, because some people just need a little catch-up time in school. I came across this epiphany when my daughter was at Cleveland High School, winning state championships, and her friends, and my daughter was studying and studying. She got a basketball scholarship. I realized some of her friends weren't as gifted as she was on the court. They didn't quite have the 3.7 GPA to get in. And I was looking at what they were going to do. So I said, I got to find the right mentors in their lives. And I have to make sure that the financial impediments are removed. So that's what we're going to do.
All right, Bruce Harold. I got it right that time. We're going to take a short break right now. When I come back, my colleague Trey Holiday is going to join you here. You're watching the Morning Update Show.
I did it for the city. I did it for the love. I did it for the people. I did it for us.
Back on this rap ish, I ain't even broke a sweat, homie, this practice. Pondering my next move, staring at my track list, hope I ain't miss my window. Praying like a Baptist, Seattle's own. Tired of this Game of Thrones. They made a list of the best rappers, and guess who wasn't on? While the disrespect continues, I'm steady packing these venues.
Converge Media produces culturally relevant content for Black and urban audiences. Our coverage is raw, transparent, and objective, praised by community leaders, government officials, and residents. Support Converge Media today via Venmo, Cash App, or PayPal at Converge Media.
Tune in this Friday at 7 p.m. for Mocha Culture, a docuseries meets concert experience that knits the stories of our local arts community and the legendary voices of color that inspire them. This Friday is Episode 1, Ray Charles, with performances by Eva Walker, Maya Marie, Chris King, and Jimmy James. Hosted by Shayna Shepherd and presented by Converge Media and the South Seattle Emerald. Tune in wherever you're watching The Morning Update.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Morning Update Show. I'm your co-host, Trey Holiday, and I am now sitting in with, he's running for mayor of the city of Seattle, Bruce Harrell. Welcome again, Bruce. Glad you're here with us.
Thank you, Trey. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I want to get into something because I have been, a part of the Black community since my existence, right? And really one of the things that we hear as kind of a recurring theme is when you get to a certain status, right? You lose the street game, you lose your ground game. And maybe it's that, you have enough income, enough money to like, oh, I'm up here in the clouds with other folks and I get disconnected there. And I want to ask you a little bit about how you plan to stay connected to some of the great work that's happening on the ground if you're elected mayor.
I appreciate the question. There was a poem by Rudyard Kipling. There was a couple of lines in there that said, if you could talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch. And I think that's what you're asking. Years ago, I had a fundraiser for a re-election that we won, and I had on the stage, I had Adrienne Brown, who was a sister. It was a pretty much African-American group. She was the CEO of a company called Intellectual Ventures. Karen Lee was the CEO of Pioneer Human Services. My wife, Joanne Harrell, who's at Microsoft. Blair Taylor, who was the president of Starbucks Foundation. Paula Boggs, who was the general counsel for Starbucks. These are pretty powerful people in corporate America. And in the audience, we had dozens and dozens of lawyers and doctors and technologists. And it was for me, and I said, do we realize how far removed we are from the people on the streets right now? We were all beneficiaries of affirmative action, okay? Civil Rights Act of 1964. I got a picture of what I was doing in 1964. I had won a bike from the KYAC radio station. I says, we were beneficiaries of people getting fire hosed and getting bit by dogs and being lynched, right? And we owe it to our next generation to uplift them, to be there for them, to support them, right? So I think to answer your question is, I hope to be as approachable as I am now. I mean, you could go around the different places and you'll see me at a coffee shop or willing to talk to people, and almost everyone has my number. My number hasn't changed in 20 years, my cell phone. But I also say that you can never do enough. I mean, you know, that while I want to be approachable and accessible, and I commit to that fully, there's times for me to get out the way. There's time for me to let the younger generation lead. I love it when David Chappelle said that on the show, right? When he said, I don't know if you saw the stand-up, and he said, well, the movie stars want to talk. He says, it's time for us to be quiet. So I recognize, and it's been always my style of leadership, there's a time for me to lead, to create, to provide resources, a time for me to sit on the sidelines and let other people lead. Yeah. So I commit. I always tell young folks, I says, don't give anyone the power to make you a liar. So if I say I commit, I commit. And I'm not going anywhere. I was born in this city, and you know, we're blessed if we get 8, 9, or 10 decades in life, right? And I done used up a few of mine, right? Okay. But I'm not going anywhere. So I'll be here for the community. I always have been, and I make that commitment if I'm so blessed to be mayor.
That's great to hear. You know, earlier before we started, we were talking about telecommunications and how that was such a growing industry. And we understand and see how the trends have literally exponentiated themselves in the last decades. One of the starts for me was at Public Access TV. And one of the comments that was right out there, thank you, Mike Wiseman, because, you know, we did have a robust public access. And at one point, maybe some of the decisions you made led to it not being as robust. And as we talk about some of the initiatives that are taken and utilizing innovation that we see with technology, what can you do now? Because, you know, you were praising us here at Converge, and this is really, you know, still in startup mode, but we had certain things that were really at a city level. How can we re-bolster those activities around public access?
Well, number one, there were a lot in 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010. There were some tough times. We had to make some tough financial decisions. We, as a city, we do own Channel 21, which quite candidly have some ideas on how we can improve that and make it more accessible. At the end of the day, Trey, it seems to me that this is still a small business, an important business. And I won't mention another journalistic source here, but there's been two that I've had meetings with in the last 3 years about how do we keep them in play, keep them afloat. I always make sure that I personally put a lot of money with the organizations that I'm involved with into them for advertisements and that kind of thing. I go back to what I said earlier, is that I will have a big bully pulpit, if you will, as mayor. The kinds of things you're talking about and the kinds of, first of all, you guys are booming. I got to tell you that I had 3 people in the last week that knew I was going to be on here and said, don't embarrass me. I said, embarrass you? I'm not trying not to embarrass myself. But I have to make sure that, again, I could bring in the resources and the relationship capital. I got to tell you, as much as we love Seattle, and I do, there are people that, for whatever reason, have moved out south, moved to Federal Way, moved to Kent. They all have roots here, right? I always tell people to read the book, The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson, because all of our roots came from down south somewhere just right. Mine were from Louisiana. So we tend to move as a community where there's jobs and opportunity. But as we fight for our revitalization here in Seattle, that I have to make sure that as many people as possible know this station, Converge Media, know what you're doing, and I'll do that. That's fun. I've had, like I said, 2 conversations, and I put it into action with 2 other organizations, and again, that's what we have to do. We have to make sure that you have the relationship capital to do whatever it is you want to achieve here. But you are, you're changing lives and you're changing the narrative, and that is so important. I said that in terms of the violence against Asian Americans that we're seeing. I said that what we saw in DC was a narcissistic president bash Asians unashamedly. And he created a narrative that really created the hate in other people. I said to the media, we have to reclaim that narrative and talk about Asians have been discriminated against as well as other people of color, but they are not responsible for COVID, as the president would lead you to believe. So I believe in what you're doing here, and I'll make sure that both from a relationship capital and a resource standpoint, that I'll do everything I can to make sure that I'm of assistance.
Well, I think it's important too. And one of the things that you talked about with Omari that I think was so key is the mentorship piece. My son has been a part of Team Issachar, which is a mentorship group coming out of Mount Zion, where brothers just got together. They're very low key. It's all like word of mouth. How will you bolster some of the programs, Project Mister? There's a lot of great programs. And you talked about it, but I want to ask about bolstering some of the things that are already happening on the ground. And just like you just said with Converge, how do you do that work as mayor?
Well, number one, I'm a member of the Breakfast Group and have been for a long time. And I was the attorney for Mount Zion Baptist Church for a number of years and was the attorney for First AME Church for a number of years. So again, my roots here in the community go back, right? So with respect to mentorship and relationship capital, the city has put structure around it. We did have a young man, unfortunately he's not with the city anymore, Anthony Shoecraft, that was doing a Black Male Achievement Program, and that work was designed exactly on point for what you're talking about. He's doing some other great community work somewhere else, I understand, I think in Oakland, if I'm not mistaken. I might have misspoke on that. But that program that was housed in the mayor's office that went to the Office of Education, we need to increase its resources, but more importantly, increase the people, the mentors, if you will, that can reach out and affect these lives. I was a little critical of the city's deployment of that program. I just didn't think the reach was effective as it could have been. We actually had an interesting policy discussion, perhaps a difference. And here's, Trey, I'd be curious on your opinion on this. We talked about having, let's use young Black men as an example, having mentors for them. And I think one would argue that the data would suggest that having an adult African-American male might be the most effective. But some people pushed back on that, and I did as well. And I said, okay, so if you got 100 potential members and 8.4% is the African-American population, and of that, let's say half are women, and so you're just going for men, you're going for a real small demographic on mentors. I said, can't a person of a different gender or a different race be a good mentor. I had some in my life. In fact, one of my pictures here is a baseball coach that was white from the University of Washington, and I quit the baseball team, and he talked to me and he says, "You never quit what you do, Bruce." And I'm still friends with him to this day. Mm-hmm. So the question I'm going to ask the community is, can we pull someone from a different demographic to give those rich mentoring services to someone? And so we're going to have that policy discussion.
Well, I think that's important. And I think a lot of what you're talking about is really staying kind of, in a way, bringing your lived experience into the mayoral office and to the mayoral administration. We have seen that, honestly, there is a real direct distrust of government officials, of elected officials, of legislators on the ground. And I think it's important that we really hit this on the head and that we understand how you, as a Black man graduating from Garfield, all of the things that you talked about in terms of your lived experience and your work experience, how we start to rebuild that trust for people that just don't believe that politicians are going to actually do the things that they say they're going to do.
It's funny, Trey, I actually got in an argument with someone about 8 years ago, and he said, "You're a politician." I am, but I didn't like the tone he used, number one, and I didn't like what it insinuated because, as I said earlier, I don't like anyone having power over me such that I compromise myself and I lie and I don't deliver with what I'm going to say. You have to look at what a person has done in their life. So I've actually litigated against the city of Seattle, okay, on race discrimination and retaliation. As an attorney, I took on a lot of controversial cases, such as representing women on a gender discrimination case against the Boeing Company, or African Americans in a class action case against the Boeing Company. So I think what they will see in me is a person that really fights for what he believes in. There's this old probably doesn't remember this, he's too young to know this, but there's a song that said, "If you don't know me by now, you'll never know me." Who sang that song?
Is that Otis Redding?
See that? Otis Redding, no. Mm-hmm. Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes. Come on, see? Now, there's a black trivia game or something like that someone told me about that have questions like this. Yes. So let the record show at Converge Media, no one in here knew, "If you don't know me by now, you'll never know me."
The song, didn't know the singer.
Okay, well, the lead singer in that song was Teddy Pendergrass. How you like those? And I tell people jokingly that I got pictures here when I was 8 years old, going to TT Minor, right? Daryl Powell, who's known me since grade school, was our quarterback at Garfield, who's on my campaign team. These good folks wouldn't get behind me if they didn't believe in my integrity and my ability. So what am I saying? I'm saying that this is an opportunity we had. I have an article here that when I was 19, I was playing football at the University of Washington. I said I was going to go into politics. Now I make mistakes. I'm the farthest one from perfect in this room, I bet. So I will make mistakes, but I will try. I will wake up before people and I'll go to bed after people. I work very, very hard. So I'm asking people to say, when I said I'm recruiting folks, this is our opportunity. These are the toughest times. I know I'm talking too much, but thank you for your patience. Yeah. In 1964, the Civil Rights Act was passed. 1967, 1968, those are some of the most trying times. You all probably weren't even born then in this country, but look what was happening then. Martin Luther King was killed, the Kennedys were killed, the Vietnam War was taking place. Louis Armstrong wrote a song in '67 called "What a Wonderful World It Is." Know his personal story. He had a tough life growing up in Louisiana, very, very poor. He actually went through several marriages. His fourth marriage stuck, but he raised a developmentally disabled son that wasn't his. He adopted his entire life. He loved that little boy, but he grew up in abject poverty. Right now in 2021, when I talk about a rebirth, you will see new leadership, not just mine, but people that I want to bring into City Hall and give them the opportunity to show their brilliance. Number one, you're going to see art and music and expression, artistic expression at new levels. So when I say that right now is the right time, I got to get people off the sidelines. Okay. And you won't hear me denigrating anyone else in the race. That's not the Harrow way. I'm running my campaign and I'm telling folks, join what we're trying to do, because I think this is our chance. This is our opportunity. And if there's one thing I do well, and I don't do a lot of things very, very well, but if there's one thing I do well, is bring teams together. And I know when to sit back and let their brilliance shine. So that's what we're going to do here. And I just have to people say that if you don't know me by now, you'll never know me.
Well, there we go. I got to ask this last question here. I wish we had more time. But my last question is, clearly the summer of 2020 was one to remember for Seattle. We saw such an uprising of people coming out, utilizing their voices. Again, kind of what you're talking about, speaking their truth and really showcasing what people power looks like. There's a quote that I really love, because the people that are in power are never as powerful as the people. How will you as mayor embody that quote? Because you would be a person in power, but like you're just talking about, you want to get people off the sidelines. You want to engage in, the community, be really of the community. How will you do that? You mentioned your press release has a lot of great ideas that you're going to do, a lot of great policy you want to push. But as this final question, I have to ask you, how will you cultivate that new culture that you talk about bringing to a Seattle that we see so divided, whether it's politically, whether you're on one side of COVID or the other side of COVID, whether you're on one side of justice or another side, we see so much division. And I got to ask how you'll bring it all together.
So one thing that you didn't ask about is my mixed heritage. My mother is Japanese. My father is Black. I lost them both. And so I was slow when I started describing them. I think I shared with you off record that they met at Garfield when they were 14. And they graduated in 1951 and they got married when they were in 1953, and they stuck it out their entire life. And I was the youngest of two. I lost my older brother too, Manisha's dad, who was at Garfield with me. So I'm the last one of that little Harrow clan. And I say that to answer your question, is that as a youngest, I don't know if we have any youngest folks, is that my voice was hardly ever heard at the dinner table. I excelled in a few things in my life, but it wasn't because I was the smartest or the toughest. It's just I had just great people around me. And if we want to play some sports, Omar looked like he could throw it down a little bit. And I say, hey, man, let's go to the gym. I was talking to Doug Baldwin last night. He was training one of the receivers. I said, I'm just a guy that likes to go to the gym early and leave late. Let's get it in. So my style of leadership is not, hey, you better do this, you better do that. Come mess with us on a Wednesday night call on the Esquire Club. I very seldom dictate anything. I like making people laugh. I like love. I like joy. I love God. So I just try to bring the best out of people. To me, that's the skill set right now. The skill set, we got too many self-righteous know-it-alls, always trying to call the shots. I know how to create a pathway to success for other people, for our community. So I say this comes from a place of love. I say, come join what we're trying to do. We're going to make some mistakes. If we hold hands through the process, we're going to be great. Let's be great together. I say, let's make history together. My brother's Esquire Club, they hear me say that all the time. I said, let's make history together. You're all making history right here, right? Out of this in 2021, we went through something people never thought would happen, this pandemic, right? And then almost the convergence of the George Floyd situation, we are at a new birth. This is our time. And I was retired. I was not thinking about running for mayor 5 months ago. I was mentoring other people to run. But a lot of people and organizations said, Bruce, we need you to get in the game. That's why your first question, I said, in the most difficult times will be some of the greatest opportunities. And I need the help. No, I don't have all the answers, Trey. I need the help. Okay. Y'all bringing awareness. There's awareness. And you know what we say in the neighborhood, right? Don't be about it. No, don't talk about it. That was my fourth mistake. Don't talk about it. You know how it goes. Be about it.
Yeah.
All right.
So that's what you'll bring.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Trey.
You guys, we're going to take a short break right now and bring my co-host Big O back to the scene. We are so thankful that Bruce Harrell was able to be here with us today. Thank you again, Bruce. It was great chatting with you. Stay tuned, you guys. We'll be right back. You're watching the Morning Update Show.
All right. Well, a little out of focus there.
It's all right. Welcome back, everybody, to the Morning Update Show.
Oh, no. I think we look blurry. Do we look blurry there? Oh, it's just the screen.
Yeah, it's just the screen.
Okay.
Yeah, all you
I was about to say, we in good hands over here.
Always.
All right. This is another. We've had almost all the candidates here.
I know it's time to get one more. I guess I mean, there's so many people running. We got to make sure we get them all.
Yeah, and the next step for us here at Converge is what we're getting ready to be doing is these are all introductory interviews, right? And so we're giving candidates an opportunity to introduce themselves to the community and everything else. Then we're gonna go around the second round, which is the 1 hour sit downs. There's so many things that me personally, I don't get an opportunity to talk to candidates about. One thing I want to talk about that I talked to a lot of other candidates, but not Bruce Harrell about was like infrastructure, all this deferred maintenance that's been out there because infrastructure isn't glamorous. People don't tweet about infrastructure and things like that. There's so much deferred maintenance here in Seattle. When you talk about even West Seattle Bridge, the drawbridges and and some of everything else. Also like to get an idea of like when you talk about negotiating with SPOG and with Mike Solon, what does that really look like? Go deeper into, so many different questions to go deeper. So just to letting our viewing audience know, this is our first round with the candidates because we want to use our platform as an introductory for candidates to introduce themselves to our viewing audience, and then we're going to go into our deep dive.
Absolutely. And I'm excited for the deep dive, because I'll tell you this, like every time I'm always like, we're out of time. And I have so much more brewing in my head when it comes from a community perspective, particularly in the times that we find ourselves in right now, where there's so much around racial justice and, being connected and staying plugged in. And we saw all these people come out. I have so many more things to ask.
Yeah. And, next time we talk to him, also, I want to talk about the campaign funding because, it's a big deal here where people about democracy vouchers or don't do democracy vouchers. But one thing that caught me, though, was when Bruce announced. Then right after that, Council President Gonzalez came out and wanted him to take a pledge. And some pledges don't take money from here, don't take money from there. But then she said that he shouldn't self-fund. Yeah. And I think, I hear where the council president's coming from, but also somebody from the neighborhood where you're like, so grow up in the neighborhood, you work hard, you make enough money to now fund your own campaign in the 10th biggest city in America. It's two sides of that. And so people outside of the central district might look at that much differently than people inside the central district. People inside the central district are like, man, somebody from our neighborhood got enough money to pay for their own campaign. This is great. And people outside of our neighborhood might look at it differently. I don't know if Council President Gonzalez realized two sides of the coin in making that statement. So.
Right. I mean, and it came out so quickly. I mean, we talked about that the day that it came out. And I think so many of us are, my thing is that is your campaign going to be funded by the people? I think that's where the democracy vouchers come in. I think it really is important that people are able to be a part of the process. And again, when we're talking about building up that trust between the public and politics and politicians, ultimately there does have to be some different measures around how campaign funding happens. But I agree with you, here on this one that, there's two sides. It's
two sides of it. I don't think that Council President Gonzalez was being malicious in making that statement, but I don't think that as well, she might not have looked at the foresight of how do people actually from the neighborhood think about that as well. Before we get out of here, we didn't get a chance to touch on it as much as we want to, but I'm letting you know for the next 4 days, all you're going to hear is Mocha Culture, Mocha Culture, Mocha Culture. We played the spot in there a little earlier. Man, producer Nikki Barron, always the overachiever, but put together a Mocha Culture is produced as well by Shayna Shepherd, and where they look back at historical Black artists and jam out. And so this Friday, 7 o'clock, there is the first episode of Mocha Culture. Eva Walker's on there, Chris King and the Gutter Balls, and they're doing a bunch of Ray Charles songs. Yeah. And this is presented by us here at Converge Media, as well as our partners at the South Seattle Emerald. That's this Friday and next Friday at 7 o'clock. So you're going to be hearing all about Mocha Culture. Any last words before we get out of here?
I'm just glad, I got to say, hearing sentiments from someone like Bruce today about, us at Converge and what we're doing here. I think it's nice. So important, that, again, thank you to the audience out there, because we say it every day, all the time, that it's because of you guys that we are here. And I just wanted to, send a special shout out to all of you, not just the $5 family, everybody on all the levels. We appreciate you guys, and appreciate you guys sharing the stream to those who could really utilize this culturally relevant approach to news. I really appreciate that. Definitely.
I gotta keep shouting out the $5 fam.
Always.
You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, you're literally keeping us on air. That's it for us today. We're back here tomorrow at 11 a.m. And we're back tomorrow with Willard Jimerson. And also, I've got a handcrafted graphic in here somewhere, right? I work hard putting these together. All right. Toshiko Hasegawa, candidate for Port of Seattle Commissioner, position 4. So Toshiko will be here tomorrow, and we're going to be talking about this port. I'm telling you, that port got big money.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? You want to be around the dough, be at the port. That's where it's at. All right, everybody. Before we get out of here, as usual, want to remind you, go forward in your purpose, go forward in your humanity, and until tomorrow at 11 a.m. Peace.
Lift every voice and sing till earth in heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day.